Shock, a power struggle in China, generals are disappearing, and invasion of Taiwan is just around the corner. Xi Jinping keeps the army under his sole control. Repression, intrigue, paranoia, total command over the troops. A missile strike from the Middle Kingdom. China is secretly supplying Russia. The world is in shock. The collapse of Russia and Chinese expansion. Everyone is preparing to take control of the Far East. All the details, I'll tell you more in a moment. Ukraine welcomes you today. I'm Rinat Aslanov, and here are the latest events. China is shaking, Xi is paranoid, the country is on the brink of chaos. The purges in the army are ongoing without pause. In just 3 years, almost the entire top military leadership has been decapitated. Only 7 out of 30 generals have kept their positions. The rest have either resigned or disappeared. An unprecedented shock. The latest episode was an investigation into Xi Jinping's first deputy in the Central Military Commission, Zhang Yuxia, as well as General Liu Zhenli, the chief of the Joint Staff Department of the Commission. Officially, they are suspected of serious violations of discipline and the law. Christopher Johnson, the director of a consulting company who previously worked at the CIA, including as a lead China analyst, made a shocking statement.
This is an unprecedented move in the history of the Chinese military, and it means the complete destruction of its top command.
The BBC notes that the Central Military Commission, which usually consists of up to 7 members, has now been reduced to just 2, Xi Jinping himself and General Jiang Shengmin. All the others were previously dismissed as part of the anti-corruption campaign. Jiang Shengmin is now responsible for maintaining political discipline and loyalty. The dismissals have affected almost all branches of the Chinese military, including the rocket force and the navy. The resignations of Zhang Yuxia and Liu Zhenli have left the military commission without leaders responsible for preparing the troops for combat operations. Now, according to the New York Times, less senior officers are involved in planning major military operations. Given the scale and complexity of managing any large and sophisticated military organization, the current leadership vacuum in China's armed forces renders them unfit to carry out their tasks, according to Taylor Fravel, director of the Security Studies Program.
This will inevitably affect the PLA's readiness to conduct large-scale and complex military operations in the short and medium term.
At the same time, the Wall Street Journal, in its article from January 31st, noted that the mass resignations of high-ranking generals allowed Xi to concentrate full control of China's military in his own hands, thereby accelerating a possible invasion of Taiwan. Lyle Morris, a senior fellow at the Asia Society Policy Institute, also sees Xi's actions as a sign of his strength, not weakness.
He is confident in consolidating his power over the armed forces.
According to one version, Xi Jinping and Zhang Yuxia had disagreements regarding the timeline for the Chinese army's readiness to invade. The chairman of the PRC insisted on achieving combat readiness by 1927, while the general advocated for a much later date, 1935. Current and former American officials told the New York Times that it is still unclear what exactly is behind the purges in the country's military leadership. Is Xi acting out of paranoia, defending himself against a real political challenge, or trying to fight corruption in the military? At the same time, American intelligence analysts have concluded that in recent years, the chairman of the PRC has shown signs of extreme paranoia. The Wall Street Journal, citing a close briefing by senior officers of the Chinese armed forces at the end of January, reported that Zhang Yuxi was accused of leaking information about the country's nuclear program to the United States. Zhang allegedly passed key technical data about China's nuclear weapons to the US. The general is also suspected of taking bribes in exchange for promotions within the procurement system. In addition, Zhang is under investigation for allegedly forming political cliques. As the Wall Street Journal explains, this implies the creation of an influence network that undermines party unity. Alternatively, Xi Jinping allegedly faced a coup attempt by his generals. China's military leadership is facing purges and repressions. This also impacts the war in Ukraine. We'll explain how next.
Xi Jinping is purging the ranks of his own generals, who are suspected of attempting a coup and trying to overthrow Xi himself. One of the largest and most alarming anti-corruption campaigns during Xi Jinping's rule is unfolding in China.
There are indeed a lot of factors at play. The military is involved as well as nuclear weapons, and there are accusations of passing information to the United States, to be honest. Here is Xi Jinping's right-hand man on military matters, along with his colleagues in the military hierarchy.
People from the innermost circle of the PRC leader who betrayed him have come under fire.
Such a story involving these kinds of exposures among the top military and political leadership of China could backfire. This also concerns the Russian Federation and, in fact, relations with Putin. In the
Center of the investigation is Colonel General Zhang Yuxia, Vice Chairman of the Central Military Commission, one of Xi's oldest associates. He was a figure of immense authority whose name for years was seen as a symbol of stability and support. Now, however, Zhang is a source of potential threat. The Ministry of Defense of the PRC suspects Zhang Yuxia of violating discipline and the law, or to be more precise, of corruption.
Chinese security services have already arrived, confiscated mobile phones, and are now thoroughly investigating their communications and contacts for signs of, once again, possible treason against the state, perhaps by a group of military personnel.
General Liu Jinli, chief of the Joint Staff of the PLA, the person responsible for operational planning, intelligence, logistics, and combat training of the Chinese army, has come under investigation. He was a friend of Xi Jinping's family.
Way back during the era of the Civil War, their fathers fought side by side together, and in fact, this man belonged to a kind of untouchable social caste, as they were commonly called in China, the so-called elite princelings.
General Liu Zhengli is a key figure in military administration. His organization plays an important role in the Ministry of Defense, from operational planning to preparing for possible wars.
There was the complex and sensitive issue of Taiwan, and also the ongoing issue of geopolitical and geostrategic confrontation with the primary global adversary, the United States of America. Ever since that pivotal moment,
October 2025, at least 9 generals have lost their positions. If Zhang Yuxia is officially removed, he will become the highest-ranking active military officer dismissed by Xi during his entire rule.
there was information circulating about China's nuclear program, how extensive it is, what the rate of nuclear missile production is, and what arsenals are currently real in China. And what was being passed on was, above all, information about the United States of America. An interesting and rather delicate detail is that the last time Zhang Yuxia was seen was during negotiations, which were public back in November 2025 in Moscow in the Russian Federation. The negotiations were with his counterpart, essentially the Minister of Defense of the Russian Federation.
The traitor may also lose his place in the Politburo. This would be an unprecedented case for a single 5-year term of power.
Xi Jinping's right-hand man on military matters. And already, let's say, since the Vietnam War, he had been closely cooperating at that time with the Soviet Union. That is, the connections with the Soviet Union still existed. So
According to experts, what is happening may not only be a possible preparation for an invasion of Taiwan, but also a tough internal consolidation. The leader of the PRC understands that an uncontrollable army could turn against him.
Such a significant scandal is layered on top of, let's say, a certain sense of disloyalty among the military establishment, or at least a specific part of the military, who are becoming much more outspoken lately. They express, in a far more aggressive and assertive manner, the urgent need for China to pursue a very specific and rigid foreign policy line going forward.
Notably, the purges have also affected officers responsible for the Taiwan direction. Xi Jinping realized that due to local corruption, his army is not ready for a large-scale operation against the island. For Ukraine, these processes are not direct, but they are strategically important. China is also a neutrally pro-Russian player. Although not openly, it still supports the Kremlin economically and diplomatically.
Of course, they will be more cautious. Then there was no talk of any military support before, nor is there now. There will be no such talk. Perhaps even China will draw certain conclusions regarding the supply of dual-use goods and will make them more complicated logistically, so that China cannot be directly accused of supporting the Russian Federation.
Xi Jinping no longer trusts Putin. Now, large-scale purges, managerial chaos, and delays in military modernization are temporarily weakening Beijing as a potential rear base for Putin's Russia during the war with Ukraine. We
have developed unique relations with China.
For Putin, this is a bad sign. He understands that he is losing an ally to whom he has bowed all these years. And
right now, Russia's share is ranked as the 4th largest in China's total trade turnover. This matters to everyone.
Against this backdrop, Moscow will lose support during an already difficult and crisis-ridden period related to the war. Meanwhile, Russia has tripled the production of Iskander missiles thanks to supplies from China. Officially neutral Beijing is in fact the main donor to Putin's military-industrial complex, which brings death and destruction to Ukrainians. More on how the Celestial Empire became an accomplice to the Kremlin's war crimes coming up next. China has become the rear base for the Russian military complex. We
have developed a special and unique relationship with China, and that is absolutely true.
The total value of technologies and equipment supplied to the aggressor country by the PRC exceeds $10 billion.
This heavy reliance on exporting goods, of course, consequently makes the Russian Federation even more deeply dependent on China, which is perfectly consistent with and supports China's long-term goals of the strategic and gradual economic absorption of the Russian state.
The Celestial Empire has become an accomplice to Putin's war crimes and is helping the Kremlin ramp up weapons production. In
the defense sector, China has significantly increased its export of priority goods to Russia, or goods with dual-use purposes, including computer chips, machine tools, radars, and sensors that Russia needs to sustain its military operations.
All of these are on the list of the most critically important goods, the export of which to Russia has been banned by 39 countries, including the UK and the US. According to an investigation by The Telegraph, China is supplying Russia with specialized machine tools. They are being purchased in huge quantities. These support Russia's defense production, particularly in the Alabuga Special Economic Zone, where Shahids are manufactured. In addition to machine tools, Beijing has supplied the Kremlin with radar and electronic warfare crystals worth $97 million, as well as microchips and memory boards worth $4.9 billion for precision weapons and Sukhoi fighter jets. Ball bearings, which are critically important for aviation, worth $130 million. Telescopic sights worth $42 million. There have also been recorded deliveries of UAV bodies, lithium batteries, and fiber optic cables for drone production.
No, we're simply thinking about how to organize our own work in the best possible way, and by joining our efforts together, achieve positive results.
The Russian Federation has become critically dependent on friendly Beijing, even in the production of missiles for Iskanders. Thanks to this support, the Kremlin was able to triple their production volume.
Only 36 missiles in the first 11 months of the full-scale war. 30 missiles produced per month in November 2023, and already 50 missiles per month projected for December 2025.
It was China that supplied the missile factory in the city of Votkinsk with a unique lathe for machining metal for warheads. Votkinsk produces the very same Oreshnik missile and other ballistic missiles.
Thus, the plant is becoming the largest center for missile production. They started with single-stage missiles, then came the Pioneer, Topol, Topol-M, too many to list them all. Let's just say that now many of the products from the Votkinsk plant have become exhibits in the closed museum of the missile forces of strategic purpose.
These are the missiles that make up the current arsenal. And if we talk about nuclear deterrence forces, 2 out of 3 components in terms of missiles are provided by the Votkinsk plant.
Later, these missiles are used by Russians to strike Ukrainian cities, destroying infrastructure and killing Ukrainians.
After the announcement of an energy truce, Russia launched Iskander-M missiles and 111 UAVs at Ukraine. Russia carried out a combined attack on Kryvyi Rih, launching more than 70 drones and an Iskander-M ballistic missile. Civilian infrastructure was damaged, more than 3,100 customers were left without electricity, and miners were trapped underground. After the massive shelling carried out by Russia on the night of January 24th, an unexploded warhead from a ballistic missile was found, Iskander-M. In
2024, China supplied about 70% of Russia's imports of a key component for ballistic missile fuel. Despite the fact that China's Ministry of Foreign Affairs rejected the accusation that Beijing supplies Russia with specialized equipment and machinery, China is currently a key trading partner of the aggressor country. Its share in Russia's foreign trade has grown by almost 34%.
Over these years, especially since the full-scale attack on Russia and Ukraine, China has essentially replaced almost all technological sectors of the Russian Federation with its own goods and services.
The Kremlin lacks sufficient domestic production capacity to manufacture such goods in the necessary volumes. Meanwhile, China's large-scale manufacturing sector allows for serial production of weapons.
China has already entered all the key sectors of the Russian economy, and in many cases, it has simply destroyed what was inconvenient for it. And whatever could be used for its own benefit, it simply took over.
China has found profit in this. Besides making money, there is also an exchange of technologies. Journalists examined footage of a Chinese Air Force plane and noticed that the bombers were armed with aeroballistic missiles. The KD-21, which are analogous to the Russian Kinzhal. It is possible that the Chinese missile was developed based on it.
This story is very similar to what happened earlier in the Soviet Union, when the state directed all its efforts exclusively toward the military-industrial complex, while the entire civilian sector either lagged behind or was completely dependent on exports.
Moscow is losing the initiative, turning into the junior partner of Beijing. The economy of the Russian Federation ended 2025 in a deep crisis. Oil prices have fallen to a 5-year low. Oil export revenues have dropped by about 20%. The US has increased its sanctions pressure. Trump signed a bipartisan law that significantly expands the scope of restrictions. And the European Union is preparing to adopt yet another, the 20th package of sanctions against the Kremlin.
Every voice matters. Join our community, support independent journalism and help us bring you the truth from Ukraine. Become a member of Ukraine today. Join us now. Collapse is no joke. A scheme for taking control of 7 million square kilometers of Russian territory has appeared on a Chinese platform. The aggressor country Russia may collapse, so it is in China's interest to take control of Russian territory in the Far East. Details in the following report.
China is Russia's main partner, supporting its economy and military machine. At least that's how the propaganda presents it.
I personally consider Chairman Xi Jinping to be a highly dependable and reliable friend, as well as a steadfast and consistent partner. He is my reliable friend, a stable partner, and a true ally of Russia. And this, in essence, serves as the fundamental and primary cornerstone for the ongoing development of our Russian-Chinese relations.
But is that really the case? After all, trade turnover with China is constantly decreasing. Chinese banks are ceasing transactions with Russia due to sanctions. And at the same time, China denies selling weapons or components to Russia.
China's position on the Ukrainian crisis is consistent and clear. We are not adding fuel to the fire and are not using this conflict for our own benefit.
Pairs, groups, tens of millions of Chinese soldiers. Right now, that's exactly what we need.
Why do you think so?
Why not?
Why? Do you really think soldiers are only supposed to...
Oh, I look at the Belgorod region and think how much we're lacking. The Chinese army, the people back.
Just 3 years ago, propagandists were rejoicing that China would replace the Western market, but it turned out that it replaced the Russian market as well. The Russian authorities are trying to patch a huge hole in the budget with a government loan in Chinese yuan.
We just bought a wonderful, completely Chinese car. It's amazing. Many, many times cheaper than the cars we used to buy before. I bought myself 3 pairs. Gucci shoes. 2,000 rubles each. Wonderful.
Probably made somewhere in China as well.
Or hopefully here too. Fake, of course. Now I buy them on principle. Only fakes.
And just look at what, for example, the soldiers are driving. What, Russian-made cars, right? You have to be a real patriot to drive a Patriot. Because it costs a fortune. It breaks down all the time. And the spare parts are insanely expensive. That's why the guys drive Chinese cars. And now they need motorcycles. Russian ones? No. Somehow that's how it turns out. There are almost no Russian ones at all. Exactly, no Russian bikes exist. So what is that? Anyone know?
Even the head of the foreign ministry, Lavrov, had a Freudian slip. He basically called Putin Xi Jinping's donkey.
As they say in the East, a guest is the host's donkey. That's why the whole program depends, of course, on those gracious offers that the Chinese president and his team made to our president. And yesterday, my friend and representative of the PRC treated me to some Peking duck. Honestly, I'll tell you, there were 2 pieces there, and I thought I'd only eat 1 piece. You get what I mean, right? Yeah, but I couldn't resist and ate the second one too. You know, it was just too delicious.
China has officially approved new geographic maps on which a part of Russian territory, a large one, Ussuri Island, is recognized as Chinese territory. And they're also openly discussing the scenario of annexing Russia's Far East, rich in gold, diamonds, and oil, which the Chinese have already, in fact, largely settled.
The Chinese dragon is unlikely to stay within its borders, simply because, by the way, it has historical claims. Certain claims to a significant part of our Far East. And that's a fact.
Of course, at first there was enthusiasm, but gradually it faded, and eventually we all realized that Asina had become a Chinese colony. Well, it's simply a slave-owning enterprise. A slave-owning operation or a prison, call it what you will, where they put overseers in place so that they could keep the workers under control everywhere. Because there is still resentment after all. And the workers in Asina even staged a protest called Asina is not China. And they also regularly threaten, saying that you won't be able to get a job anywhere in this city. Here's your black mark. So just sit quietly and keep your mouth shut for your 15 to 30,000.
Russian television is already showing segments about how to find a Chinese husband. And in Russian schools and government institutions, Chinese is being actively studied.
People are divided into two camps. Those who want to study it, and those who are skeptical and say, why do we need Chinese? We're never planning to go there. I answer them very simply, actually. I tell them, I'm not teaching you Chinese here, but rather using Chinese as a tool to teach you. The Chinese language makes you think critically. And that skill will always come in handy.
It reached the point of complete absurdity when Xi Jinping declared that Russia would not have won World War II without China, and Putin silently agreed.
China and Russia, being the main theaters of military operations during World War II, made a decisive contribution to the victory over fascism. And in doing so, they laid the cornerstone for the post-war world order.
It turns out that China is not helping Russia at all, as Putin tries to present it, but is simply taking advantage of its weakness to seize resources and strengthen its influence in Asia.